You're listening to Subsound Radio. We bring you streaming and live broadcasting from the capital. This is the Alarpa Podcast. Welcome to the latest episode of the Alarpa Podcast. Joining me today, of course, is the wonderful Maria. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. You?
I am also very good. Very kind of you to ask me. So, obviously, it's another episode, another topic to discuss. What's on the menu today?
Okay, we're going to be talking about culture and education in Spain before the Civil War. So that's 20s and 30s in particular.
Why the 30s? In respect to other decades?
Okay, it's just a very interesting period. Basically, Spain is always running kind of like 50 years behind in like industrialization, for example. You know, we're always slightly running behind the rest of Europe. But, you know, in between 1910s and 1930s, there is kind of like a little bit of an explosion of education rates and just, you know, Spain becoming sort of like more international.
So Spain opened up to the world quite dramatically. Obviously, there must have been some catalyst for this. What was that catalyst? What was the change?
I think, well, from the beginning of the 20th century, there are a series of writers who are, you know, like the 98 generation, and then what will be the 1927 generation. And there are just a series of writers and artists in general who decide that Spain needs to be, you know, brought to the 20th century and brought to the same level as the rest of Europe, because at the time, you know, virtually almost half of the population were illiterate. So, you know, it's kind of like a movement that wants to spread education and culture, and they are greatly supported by the Second Republic. I think their goal was kind of like twofold, like they wanted to reach you know, the lower classes and give them more education, but at the same time they wanted to promote you know, the culture of more educated people by bringing people that were famous internationally at the time.
So was there some kind of socialist underpinning to this educational movement, in the sense that they wanted to touch the lower stratums of society in particular? So was there some kind of political edge to this?
Definitely. I mean, we're talking about a time when, for example, the agricultural reform took place, which is basically taking land, you know, from like large landowners and kind of like doing a little bit of redistribution and things like that. So it's in the same lines, like trying to bridge the gap between the two classes, because Spain was still a very kind of like polarized society.
And were the working classes receptive to this movement? And if they were, was it in a political sense that they were receptive to it, or were they looking to have more access to cultural education?
I think, well, I don't think it's necessarily just political. I mean, of course, people, for example, in rural Spain, who was, which was, you know, most of the people dedicate themselves to agriculture at the time. Obviously, they were in favor of like socialist and communist, even anarchist policies, favor the rights and the rights to the land and their work rights and so on. But I don't think it was just that. I mean, they were engaged because people were coming from from Madrid and from big cities, and they were just bringing culture to small villages and hamlets that didn't know, for example, like the great works of Spanish art and writers and theater and so on.
Was there any? Did you find any arrogance from the artists that they were kind of coming from the mountaintop to spread the word of literature and culture, or for the most part were these people pretty sincere in their intentions?
I definitely don't see any arrogance in what they did. I think they had a genuine desire to, and to make to spread culture. They lived for culture, and they just thought it was very unfair that and even like in the 20th century that there was like such a difference between classes, and they believed that culture should be something accessible to everybody.
And very often when there's a big idea in society, there's a reaction to it. Was there such a reaction in Spanish society to this modernization?
Well, I mean, I think it was quite popular. In like they reached even like 7,000 small villages where they did activities like like theater. Like they took some copies of famous paintings there, and just writers lending them books, creating libraries, and things like that. So I think it actually had a nice impact. The other spectrum of society, I don't think they were particularly bothered. They didn't really believe that the lower class should be educated.
Okay, so they didn't believe that they should be educated.
No, and the proof of that is that after the Civil War, these programs get completely scrapped.
They were suspicious of it. Were they scared of it that educated working class would be more difficult to control or to interact with?
I think they were definitely scared of it because we have to remember that it's a moment where it is a moment where basically the lower classes are becoming more powerful through government and through the trade unions and other means. So I think they were definitely scared because they were somehow partially really empowered by the Republic in particular.
So this sounds like a second age, a second golden age in Spanish culture. The first obviously featuring writers like Cervantes. This first golden period is something that we are all familiar with to a certain extent. Why is it that this second and more recent golden age has been largely forgotten?
I don't think it's been largely forgotten, but it's just focused on the generation, the 98 generation and the 27 generation, which are two generations of writers and creators and so on, with people as famous as Lorca and Dali, and who become like internationally renowned. The thing is that the job that the work that they did to bring that culture to the masses, I think that's the part that has been forgotten, and I think that's largely probably due to the fact that all these programs were then stopped during the dictatorship, and there wasn't a particular emphasis on trying to educate.
And this didn't happen in isolation. There was an international dimension to this cultural development.
Well, one of the most important things that they did, I mean, we talked about bringing education to the masses, but also, putting Spain in the cultural map, by bringing people that scientists like Einstein, they were bringing, really, really famous writers, philosophers, that artists in general that were coming over to visit and bringing sort of like the latest advances.
And there's quite a humorous anecdote about Einstein, newspaper reports and that kind of thing. Can you elaborate?
Well, it's quite funny. Recently there has been a book published about it, relating the visits that Einstein paid to Madrid, and essentially like everybody was really excited because they knew it was somebody very important, but they just didn't know exactly what he did in many cases. And there's a funny anecdote of him walking along Gran Via, and a woman shouting cheers for like the inventor of the car, who obviously wasn't Einstein, but this woman knew that he was very famous, so he figured out that it must be something as important as the car.
And why were people like Einstein attracted to Spain? Or was it a country that was in the popular imagination? Or was it something exotic, a new land that was just being discovered by all these intellectuals from around the world?
Well, I think that exotic character has always been a bit of a handicap for Spain, because many travelers have come over just purely, for that reason, for the exotic or whatever. But actually, I think this is quite an important moment, because the people that are coming over are coming invited by institutions of what is called the Institute of Free Education, would kind of be the translation, formed by all these people that we've been talking about, and they're the ones that they even have a committee whose function it is to invite speakers from other countries and get them to collaborate in their bulletin and so on. So I think the reason why they come is because they are being included within the group. Even like the writers, artists in Spain are traveling to other places. We know about Lorca living in New York. We know about Dali. So they're just kind of like establishing those international relationships in a way that means that they're going out and other people are coming in just in a natural way.
It's fascinating stuff, and very appropriate to Madrid today as well. As you are no doubt aware, we are both teachers, and Madrid is very committed to improving the educational capacity of the students around in the city with regards to speaking a second language. This language, of course, being English. So we have examples of this kind of transformation happening back around 80, 90 years ago, and also writers traveling around the world and kind of learning about other cultures as well, which is what's happening in Madrid now. People are coming from around the world, particularly from the Anglophone world, to Spain to kind of teach about their culture. And of course, they go back with knowledge of the Spanish culture as well. So do you see any parallels with what's happening now and what happened in the period that you're referring to?
I think that's an interesting question, because basically now we have a very globalized world, and it's much easier to travel to different places and much quicker, and ideas spread a lot faster. However, I think at the time there was some form of globalization in the sense that despite the difficulties, there were letters being exchanged. There were people like traveling lots of hours just to come and give a conference in Madrid or Barcelona. So I think there's definitely a parallel, and I don't know, I find it so charming that at the time it was so much harder, yet people made a very big effort to make it happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a romantic time, I think, in Spanish history. The distance between people and ideas and actual nations was a lot larger than it is now, living as we are in the globalized world, as you put it. Okay, so it's wonderful stuff. I think I'll have to definitely delve deeper into it myself off air. Do you have any final comments about this?
Well, I would just encourage people to do some research on this. There are a couple of websites that detail the program that was carried out between 1931 and 1936 for this education of people, illiterate people, especially in villages. And it's just like quite curious, quite funny, and quite interesting to read the things that they did, and especially their reactions that they got from the villagers.
Okay, well, the past is another country. I think can be expressed in many different ways for this podcast. Well, join us in just a moment for part 2. welcome back to part 2 of the show. So Maria, well, are you refreshed and excited?
I'm very excited. I'm always excited doing the podcast.
Okay, that's our listeners. All 2 of them will be happy to hear that. So, of course, this is December. We're coming up to Christmas. Stay tuned over the next few weeks for little references to the Christmas season, and one episode as well dedicated to a Christmas topic as well. So, for now, stay well. Do what you do best, and we'll catch in with you on the next episode of the El Arpa podcast. Is Anna saying bye bye?
Maria saying bye.
You're listening to Subsound Radio. We bring you streaming and live broadcasting from the capital. This is the El Arpa podcast.